Hello and welcome to the Laredo Housing Authority, Section 8 Landlord Briefing. What will be covered today? Starting with what are Section 8 vouchers? Following to Laredo Housing Authority, tenant and landlord obligations. The advantages of Section 8. Steps and roles of the landlord. Charges and rent increase. Required annual actions. And evictions and terminations. What are Section 8 vouchers? The Housing Choice Voucher Program is the federal government's major program for assisting very low-income families, the elderly, and the disabled to afford decent, safe, and sanitary housing in the private market. Since housing assistance is provided on behalf of the family or individual, participants are able to find their own housing, including single-family homes, townhouses, mobile homes, and apartments. The participant is free to choose any housing that meets the requirements of the program. Housing Choice Vouchers are administered locally by the Laredo Housing Authority. The LHA receives federal funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to administer the voucher program. A family that is issued a housing voucher is responsible for finding a suitable housing unit of the family's choice where the owner agrees to rent under the program. This unit may include the family's present residence. Rental units must meet minimum standards of health and safety as determined by the Laredo Housing Authority. A housing subsidy is paid to the landlord directly by the Laredo Housing Authority on behalf of the participating family. The family then pays the difference between the actual rent charged by the landlord and the amount subsidized by the program. Laredo Housing Authority's obligation. The Laredo Housing Authority provides a family with the housing assistance that enables the family to seek out suitable housing. The Laredo Housing Authority enters into a contract with the landlord to provide housing assistance payments on behalf of the family. If the landlord fails to meet the owner's obligations under the lease, the Laredo Housing Authority has the right to terminate assistance payments. The Public Housing Authority must re-examine the family's income and composition at least annually and must inspect each unit at least annually to ensure that it meets minimum housing quality standards. Tenants' obligations. When a family selects a housing unit and the Laredo Housing Authority approves the unit and lease, the family signs a lease with the landlord for at least 1 year. The tenant may be required to pay a security deposit to the landlord, which cannot exceed 1 month's rent. After the first year, the landlord may initiate a new lease or allow the family to remain in the unit on a month-to-month lease. When the family is settled in a new home, the family is expected to comply with the lease and the program requirements, pay its share of rent on time, maintain the unit in good condition, and notify the Public Housing Authority of any changes in income or family composition. Landlord's obligations. The role of the landlord in the voucher program is to provide decent, safe, and sanitary housing to a tenant at a reasonable rent. The dwelling unit must pass the program's housing quality standards and be maintained up to those standards as long as the owner receives housing assistance payments. In addition, the landlord is expected to provide the services agreed to as part of the lease signed with the tenant and the contract signed with the Public Housing Authority. Property owners maintain the same rights and responsibilities in the voucher program as they would with an open market tenancy, including providing all management and rental functions, including tenant screenings, ensuring that the property meets basic health and safety standards, including paying for any owner-supplied utilities, and collecting a security deposit, tenant monthly rent portion, and charging for damages caused by tenant. Advantages of Section 8. PHA guarantees housing assistance payment portion of rent on monthly basis. Free annual inspections 90 to 120 days prior to the anniversary month of the contract. Upon tenant's request and with PHA's approval, PHA can adjust tenant's rent. Free special inspections. Suspicion of damage to the property can result in a request for a special inspection. Initially, tenants pay on affordable rent up to 40% of their adjusted income. PHA also offers direct deposit for your half payment, a free and secure way of receiving your money every first of the month. We recommend this feature. Another advantage of Section 8 is free advertising. Upon request, landlords can advertise their units available by contacting Laredo Housing Authority at 956-722-0221 or via email to support@larha.org or through fax to 956-753-4113 and provide the following information: the unit's address, bedroom size, a contact name and phone number, the rent price and deposit amount. How to become a Section 8 landlord. First, search for a Section 8 voucher holder. Proceed with the screening, and then complete a request for tenancy. After completion of your request for tenancy, please return the form to the Section 8 office. Then, request and complete a W-9 vendor and direct deposit form. In addition, prepare a unit for inspection. In no time, you will be calling yourself a Section 8 landlord. The Housing Authority does not screen participants for suitability as renters. Owners should perform their normal landlord reference checks, credit reviews, etc. The Housing Authority can only supply owners with the current and previous applicant address and landlord information if known. Complete request for tenancy. Before the Laredo Housing Authority can perform an initial inspection, the tenant will provide the landlord with a request for tenancy approval. This form must be filled out completely because missing information will slow the process. Request for tenancy. After you send us the request for tenancy approval, we check the rent and utilities for affordability. When the voucher is issued to the family, they are provided with an affordable rental rate range based on their income. We strongly recommend that you talk to the participants ahead of time to find out what they can afford. If a family's share of gross rent exceeds 40% of the family's income, then the family won't qualify for the unit. The request for tenancy approval form is simply your intention to rent to the tenant and sets the terms for the tenancy. Either party may withdraw from the process before a lease or contract is executed. Your lease is the binding agreement with your tenant. Other important information. Side payments are not allowed whatsoever. Landlords must never collect side payments from participants. Asking for or accepting a side payment is considered fraud and can make the landlord and/or tenant eligible to participate with the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Owners and participants cannot be related. Please note that landlords and participants in the Housing Choice Voucher Program cannot be related. However, rare exceptions can be made in order to accommodate disabilities. Provide receipts for paid rent. Landlords must provide proof of payment of rent. Tenants should not move in before inspection. Participants are encouraged not to move into a rental unit before it passes inspection. That means that participants who move in prior to the unit passing inspection are responsible for the total amount of contract rent. This can result in financial hardship for the participant and inconvenience for the landlord. Units must be prepared for inspection. To ensure a speedy inspection process, units must be ready for inspection at the scheduled time. Construction or rehabilitation work must be complete. Also, the unit must be unoccupied unless it is occupied by the tenant for whom the inspection was scheduled. If a unit is not ready for inspection at the scheduled time, Housing Authority inspectors will not inspect the unit, which will delay the process. Utilities. Generally, at the initial lease-up, the owner is responsible for demonstrating that all utilities are in working order, including those utilities that the family will be responsible for paying: water, light, gas, etc. All utilities must be in service prior to the initial inspection. If the utilities are not in service at the time of the inspection, the inspector will notify the owner to have the utilities turned on and reschedule the initial appointment. The required appliances must be in place before the housing assistance payment contract is executed by the Laredo Housing Authority. If the family is responsible for supplying the stove and the refrigerator, the Public Housing Authority will allow the stove and refrigerator to be placed in the unit after the unit has met all other housing quality standard requirements. The Public Housing Authority will execute the housing assistance payment contract based upon a certification from the family that the appliances have been installed and are working. A confirmatory inspection will be scheduled within 30 days of the housing assistance payment contract approval. HQS inspections. HQS stands for Housing Quality Standards. These inspections come in 3 different varieties. First, we have initial inspections. These occur when a voucher holder indicates to the Laredo Housing Authority that they desire to lease a specific housing unit. The unit must pass the initial inspection before the execution of the assisted lease and housing assistance payment contract, as well as the initiation of payments. Then we have annual inspections. These occur once a year on housing units that are currently under lease by a Housing Choice Voucher participating family. And lastly, we have special inspections. These may be complaint inspections or quality control inspections. These are some key aspects housing quality inspectors take note of. When considering becoming a Section 8 landlord, please note the following forms. It is extremely important to update your information. If there's any changes to your address, ownership, or payee name, please let the Laredo Housing Authority know. Information for annual inspections. The owner is responsible for failure or damage caused by normal wear and tear. The landlord and tenant will be provided with a list of required repairs. Each party will have 24 hours for emergency repairs and 30 days to complete non-emergency items. If a re-inspection does not pass within the time period or any extension, the following actions will be taken. For tenant responsibility failures, termination of the participant's rental assistance. This places responsibility on residents to minimize and repair damages above normal wear and tear that they cause to the rental unit in order to keep their rental assistance. For landlord responsibility failures, abatement of the rental assistance payment from the housing authority will be applied. Until the unit passes re-inspection, the housing assistance payment will be reinstated or terminated. Abatement means that the housing authority's share of the rent is not paid to the owner at all since the unit does not meet minimum housing quality standards. The tenant is not responsible for paying that portion of the rent and may not be evicted for non-payment of the housing authority's share. How to request rent increase. Owners who request a rent increase must do so only at the annual renewal of the rental assistance contract. The request must be in writing and submitted to our office and the tenant 60 days prior to the renewal. Units that do not pass the initial inspection at the renewal are not eligible for a rent increase even if they pass the re-inspection. However, if the items are the tenant's responsibility, we will allow the rent increase. If the rent increase is comparable to other similar units, it can be granted. However, the unit does not compare, you will be notified in writing and allowed to decline continuing in the rental assistance program. Termination. If a tenant falls behind in the rent or violates any of their lease obligations, give the tenant and our office a 30-day written notice on the first of the month. If there is a criminal or drug activity, or if the tenant is causing damage to the unit, you may give the tenant a 3 to 5 day notice.